Andy, welcome to the show. I love getting into these conversations about buying and selling companies, particularly with an expert like yourself. I'm looking forward to the insights you can give our people. And I think it's perfect timing. We didn't talk about a pre-show, but end of year, you should be thinking about these things, whether you want to immediately sell your business or buy one, or do that in the upcoming year. So if you can give the audience a little bit of your background, although they could have read it before they joined us, why don't you do that? Let's start there and then let's dive in.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started businesses right out of school, wasn't very successful with a couple of small startups, cell phones, things like that. I wound up buying a business with my cousins in Hartford, Connecticut. It was a small food pasta store, kind of gourmet food store. And it was a great experience of buying a business and then eventually selling it. And it was a small little business, bought it for $45,000, sold it for $65,000. And so it was a good experience. In the process, I had met my wife and she grew up in Florida and she said, hey, I want to move to Florida. So I moved to Florida looking to buy another business because I liked that process and I like getting into business. I had started some businesses and, startups are tough and you don't make money for a while. So I wanted to buy another business. So I looked to buy another business and I wound up at Transworld one day, a business broker. And I had never met a business broker before. I had bought and sold my own business in Connecticut, never knew what a business broker was. But in Florida, they were pretty prolific. And when I met Don and Bonnie, the then owners, they liked me. They invited me to join the team. I joined the team. I fell in love with the industry. Like you said, it's a very interesting thing. Love buying and selling, talking about buying and selling, helping people buy and sell. And so I fell in love with the business. 2 years later, I bought the company and built it from one office to 10 offices in the state of Florida. And eventually we decided to franchise in 2010. And over the last, 11 years, 12 years, we have built that to a, 200 office franchise across the world. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
It's a great story. And by the way, before we forget, you also have a nonprofit that's doing some great stuff, don't you?
I think it's, fun to give back. I think it's imperative for business owners to get into their community, help fix their communities, be a part of their community. And so I always encourage that. And I was on a board of a small nonprofit, a soup kitchen, emergency food pantry here in Broward County, Florida, called LifeNet for Families. And I started cooking dinner from my pasta dinner days, pasta shop days. I started cooking dinner for my family and friends to raise some money. And that dinner has grown to a 1,000-person dinner where we raise, a little over $250,000 a year now. So it's our 20th year, and it's been an incredible kind of. I think I'll be known more for that than I will perhaps being in the business world. So,
well, but that's a great thing. I mean,
yeah, it's good.
Just to pause it for a moment. I mean, America would be, I think, much stronger today if more people were involved in their communities and involved in the political process, understood the issues and voting and that type of thing. So I think it's great you're doing that. So my hat's off to you. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And like you said, it's very timely to do all those things. I mean, holidays are a great time to take a step back and see how you can help your fellow man and be generous. And at the same time, like you were earlier saying, you started off saying, hey, this is a great time to and a lot of families do sit down over Thanksgiving dinner, over Christmas dinner, over Hanukkah, whatever their holiday is. They sit down and they say, maybe it's time to move on, or maybe it's time for me to get out of corporate America and buy a business.
Yeah, or maybe it's time to stop my company from bumping along at the same level. There was one guy I met after I did a talk whose company had been around $1 million for 20 years. And he's like, oh, yeah, I got to do some of the leadership stuff you're talking about. I got to do some changes. By the way, he asked me to call him, never returned my call. So it's fine. But, it is time to really think, what would I do differently? Why don't we start with the piece of, if you want to sell your business, I mean, what are really the critical metrics you want to look at to maximize the value of your business?
Well, the bottom line is being able to prove your bottom line, right? So it comes down to the quality and quantity of the earnings drive value and drive multiples. So the more earnings you have, the bigger multiple you're going to get for a business. And just like anecdotally, If you're making $100,000, your business may sell for 2 times. If you're making $1 million, you may sell for 5 times. If you're making $10 million, you may sell for 8 times. And those are just very rough numbers, and depending on industry and depending on the source of that income. But so the first thing you want to understand is, how do you make money? Because that's what you're going to have to prove to a buyer. And people buy businesses based on what it made in the past only because they think that's a good predictor of the future.
Yeah. And, I do a tremendous amount of work with IT service providers. So they're doing outsourced help desk and IT projects and whatever. And the multiples are crazy right now in our industry. And the smart ones have built in a lot of recurring revenue contracts. So they range from 1 year to 3 years, outsourced help desk. And those tend to talk to the audience here about, when you have some recurring revenue locked in versus the day-to-day or the project or the walk through the door stuff, how that can affect your valuation.
Well, recurring revenue is something everybody wants, and they highly value it. So you see things like insurance companies, security alarm companies, any company, pest control companies that have these recurring revenues. Oftentimes they're sold on a multiple of gross, not even net, gross. Yeah. And, those multiples can be 3 times, 4 times, 5 times annual, and sometimes even bigger. And of course, when competition comes into play into something like IT, I was reading through a list of the latest 200 SPACs that are out there, companies that are investing in, and I read through these 200 investment SPACs, and it took me.
So wait a minute, just for the audience, what's a SPAC?
A specialty acquisition company, right? So They're companies that raise capital, they go public, and they're out there to grow and to become a company. And I had to read through, I think, 60 profiles before I got to one that didn't say they were investing in technology. So there's all this money. I mean, hundreds of companies. And these are sophisticated investment types that are out there, incredible money chasing companies that want to, that might have recurring revenues. And if you do get to a point where you do have revenues and your earnings in the IT world, you're going to have a lot of suitors.
Well, and the other thing, and then you go to the boring stuff, like for instance, locally, we got a car wash chain, Quick Quack Car Wash. And it just, I don't know whether it started out as a real estate play like McDonald's did or whatever, but it's just a cash register. And so they took a mundane business, created a monthly recurring, membership, which a lot of car washes have done. But I'm curious, with all the businesses you've seen, what are some of, and I'm doing this to encourage our audience, if you don't have a recurring revenue stream, create one. So what are some of the most creative recurring revenue streams that you've seen in the businesses that you looked at?
Well, I mean, you could look at some of the, smart players out there in the world. The car wash is a great example of it. How about the massage business, right? So the massage business got into the ability to have a recurring revenue model in Massage Envy and now Massage Heights of franchise models, but they have now turned this into a recurring revenue model. And those businesses, I've seen some of those businesses resell. They sell for a lot of money, much more than a multiple of their earnings. The other one I saw, I have a friend who was in the dog grooming business, and he basically started a franchise called Scenttown. Tim's a great guy. And his model is a car wash, basically for dogs. You go shopping, you drop off your dog, and you come out, and the dog's is washed, teeth brushed, and they don't do grooming. It's just basically a car wash for dogs, and it's, I think, $30 a month or $40 a month. Again, recurring revenue model. So anything that you could get those EFTs, those electronic fund transfers into your business, people love that stuff. And historically, you saw the gyms start with that, the right. Orange Theories, and you see these gyms that have these amazing valuations because they got into the recurring revenue model.
Yeah, and am I correct that part of the reason it's so attractive to an investor is one of the things they're gauging is how quick do I get my money back?
Yeah, everybody wants a return on it, return on investment. So, and they want the ability to grow. So, a recurring revenue model is, I love goodwill and I love businesses that have been around a long time because people's habits change very hard. People hate change. And so you see what happens when people sign up for so many things. And same thing with gym memberships as well. They don't use them. And, they're banking on that and they're making money, without having to provide services sometimes.
Yeah. So actually, it might be a bad thing for our economy if people actually learned how to manage their money better and they realized, hey, I'm not using this gym membership or these 3 gym memberships that I have, and then change.
Right. Well, and yeah, or their Spotify or their, Apple Music, all those kind of things. I know I have some things out there. I still think I have direct TV, and I don't know when was the last time I watched it, but I think my kids are watching it. So,
well, that's why I have Apple Music for my kids.
Right.
That works for them. Well, let me flip this, Andy. I'm really curious. So, what if instead you're a strong business and you do want to sell someday, but you're not there yet, and maybe you're pretty attuned to your metrics, but you want to go shopping, you want to go buy a company? What are the gotchas you got to watch out for? Because it's kind of like when you hire somebody, when you're buying a company, that the person you're looking to acquire, the business you're looking to acquire, puts on their best face, their best look. They're going to try to really impress you. What do you need to watch out for? Where do you find those things so you can avoid those, oh, I should have moments after the purchase?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you want to kind of try to figure out for your own business. Can I, operate another location? Do I have the management in place? What kind of management do they have? Do they have non-competes where the manager is just going to go start a new business or a new location elsewhere? Take people like a hair salon or something like that, where they take the whole staff and go somewhere else. Those are kind of gotchas as well. I mean, there's always litigation things that you want to hire a team and you want to do a good due diligence. But I think part of understanding what you want is even more important, because you could almost find anything. And these days, I tell this to everybody, it's an absolute seller's market right now. There is very little inventory out there. People come to me all the time. Hey, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this when I buy a business. We're looking for this. Like I said, tons of private equity money, tons of SPACs, tons of family offices. There's just money out there chasing deals. You're probably not going to find your ultimate acquisition on the market. So what you need to do is you have to kind of decide, what are we looking for? What geographic space? And if you could get specific, then you could get someone like Transworld to be out on the lookout for those kind of companies or help you search.
Yeah. So when you say help you search, do you actually do like recruiting? Do you make calls? I got somebody who's looking for your type of business, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We do some buy-side searches for many people, and mostly because we already have the list, right? We have the list of businesses out there. We've interviewed a bunch of businesses and we know a lot of businesses. So if the right buyer comes along, we'll do it. I just did it. We sold a business. It was a landmark restaurant on the historical federal designation called the Mai Kai. We just got it done. It's world famous. Everybody loves the Mai Kai. But that owner says, hey, I want these 3 other landmark kind of businesses. And I can't mention which one because we're still under, working on them. And I approached them. And actually I contacted one of the owners through Facebook, and I was able to contact one of the owners, and they said, we've been thinking about selling, and, it was just perfect timing for everybody.
Yeah, that's great. What about when you talked about liabilities? So you talked about people leaving, other, legalities. I mean, there could be a lawsuit that's pending that you don't know about. But what about, do you ever recommend asset purchases versus buying the company where, you can hopefully remove some of that liability?
99 almost % of what we do are asset sales.
Okay.
Most attorneys want the buyers to start a new entity, buy only the assets. So they're not buying the the sales tax liabilities or any liabilities beforehand, and then bring those assets into the new company. You just have to make sure those assets aren't encumbered by a lawsuit, by a tax lien, by something else.
Yeah. And how do you do that?
You could do searches online. Okay. I mean, you'll never know, perhaps if there's a lawsuit that hasn't come before, but right. That's again, having a good team of attorneys that have the right paperwork, that are putting together hold harmless agreements and, reps and warranties, and having those kinds of things in the agreements. And it's also important for buyers to make sure that the seller has some sort of skin in the game, whether there's a seller note, a seller earnout, or perhaps at least some money in escrow to cover any liabilities that are unforeseen post-closing.
And once again, how many businesses has your organization with all its 200 franchisees, been in? How many transactions have you guys been involved in?
We think 10,000, so it's hard to count, but right now we're at a clip of, easily over 1,000 a year. This year in Florida alone, I think we did 300. We're over 320 so far this year.
Okay.
So it's we're pretty prolific, selling mostly businesses valued less than $50 million, and the average size right around $1 million, $2 million. Okay. So mom and pop businesses. I mean, I just sold my father-in-law's practice, his physician practice.
Yeah.
And so, and I've done a lot of deals for family, but, it could just be a single person business sometimes.
Yeah. And so as you've gone through these many, many transactions as the franchise organization, and actually you're operating in the business yourselves, are you continuously updating these legal agreements and different things? So it's really, and I'm just trying to be fair. I've got great attorney friends and they're extremely capable, but it sounds like if you're involved in these many transactions and you guys are on top of it, that there's legal changes every year. So you'd have a more thorough agreement to work with, or a thorough legal team than I might be able to find on my own.
Yeah. So we do like people to use attorneys that know what they're doing, right? So, my brother is an attorney, he's an M&A attorney, but, if he was a divorce attorney, we wouldn't be recommending for people to do that kind of legal work. Yes, we're always updating our forms. In fact, a couple of years ago, we had to make sure that we put on all our forms, we will not send you wire instructions via email. We will never send you wire instructions. I have to tell all my trainees that I would never ask them for gift cards from, Apple. So, the CEO of the company will never ask you to go out and buy gift cards, because there's so much fraud out there and you have to be super careful. And we've had a couple of transactions where people get duped into wiring money to the wrong place. But, again, so there's all kinds of things like that. And when laws change, employment law changes, there needs to be hold harmless agreements, and there needs to be overtime, making sure that people don't owe people overtime or vacation pay. The other thing that's kind of come up lately is gift cards. Talk about that kind of recurring revenue. Another way for companies to make money is they sell a lot of gift cards during the holidays. And so we go to sell a company, and if you don't ask, by the way, your gift card program, how much money do you have out on the street? And sometimes it's hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And the dirty little secret is that most of the time, the redemption rate is about 20%, 25%. So is it fair for the seller to give back 100% of that? Maybe not. But is it fair for the buyer to have to eat 100% of the gift cards that come in post-closing? No. So, those are things that we have to watch out for, and we have to make sure our paperwork reflects that kind of thing.
So going back to the people issue, so if I buy somebody, an organization, a lot of the value is going to be in the people. But what do you find are the best practices for an acquirer to keep the people, with them as they move forward?
Well, they have to act fast, and they have to have really good communication. So we don't usually allow our sellers or buyers to notify the employees before the closing. And with the exception of someone who may be very key or high level. But other than that, the everyday workers are not going to know about the transaction until after. And then even then, sometimes it might be a soft kind of rolling thing where, hey, we have they bought into the firm, maybe not, making it sound a little bit less threatening, because people do get scared. Again, people hate change. They're scared of change. So the thing that the new owners have to do is immediately go, hey, listen, we love this company. That's why we're investing in it. That's why we bought it. We have great plans. We have great plans for your development as an employee. Pull those people aside one by one, go over with them what their life goals are, what do they want to see in the company, ask them for their input. I mean, it's really about engaging people and making them feel wanted and making them feel needed.
Yeah, no, and then I'm just building on what you're saying. I totally agree. Making them feel valued, and then also connecting with them, like you said. Where do you want to go in the organization? How can we make this a better opportunity for you? And then they can kind of sort through it. And then if you continue communicating consistently, you can build trust. And if you build the trust and build meaning, then you'll keep them. So and I agree. Some maybe there's one key person, or maybe there's multiple, that you need to give a heads up early, because otherwise they're going to be offended.
Yeah, well, people is the number one thing, right? If you ask a business owner what keeps them up at night right now, it's people. It's human capital right now. You don't have to look far to see that the unemployment rate is way down, that the service workers out there in the world are in high demand and they can't find people to work. We talked about people managing their money and not doing. So I do think that there's a little bit too much money out there in the world and people are deciding not to work. I think that's going to change because people cannot save money, as historically most people don't save money. So they'll be back at work. But till then, what we're seeing, and especially with the trades, you think of the plumbing businesses and the electricians and the AC companies. When we're selling an AC company, the first question the buyer wants to know is, how many guys do they have that are licensed? And because people are buying companies just to get people.
Yeah. Well, and that's been going on for a while, but I agree with you. It's at a height right now.
It's at a height. Yes, it's been going on for a long time.
Things are kind of crazy right now. So a lot of things are crazy right now. So in closing, Andy, what advice would you give to people? And if they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
Well, if you're going to sell your business, this is a great time. That's, if you want to consider, and baby boomers on average are turning 67 years old. And so that's kind of when their full retirement kicks in. So if you want to sell, this is a good time. And it may come to pass that the full baby boomer generation will have to transfer all those businesses, and it may not be a good time to sell. So right now is a good time to sell. If you want to buy, you have to get into the game. You have to become educated, listen to people like yourself, David, and listen to people, get educated on the process, because you're not going to be able to just shop and buy a business. You're going to have to understand what's a good deal and what's not a good deal and get into it. It's just like going out to buy a car or a house. You're not going to buy the first one you see. You're usually going to want to compare. And so I would give people the advice, if you want to buy, learn how to buy a business, learn the valuation so you can feel good about it yourself. And if you're going to buy, you got to be that entrepreneur. You got to be that strong entrepreneur, because there's going to be tons of people. Not everybody's an entrepreneur. There's going to be tons of people saying, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't take that risk. And that's what this is all about, is taking risk and being able to win. And so get educated. But at the end of the day, you got to take the risk.
Well, and it sounds like you're setting expectation also that there's a process to get educated.
Yes.
And part of that education process, I would suggest, is probably you have to be prepared to walk away when the terms aren't exactly what you're comfortable with. And so, it's kind of like hiring somebody. You've got to recognize the yellow flags, the red flags, and not just kind of dismiss them because you're enamored with these shiny objects over here. So, and it sounds like your company's good at helping people sort through that. So what's the best way if they want to check out what you guys do of getting hold of you or a member of your team?
Yeah, just come to tworld.com, TWORLD.com, tworld.com. And my email address is simple, ac@tworld.com. And, if you drop me a line, I'd be happy to talk to you.
Super, Andy. Thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate the insights. And I'm sure we got people out there who'll probably contact you and, they either want to buy or sell.
Absolutely. Great talking to you.